The Dominion's vast surveillance network stretched across the stars, monitoring every ship, every signal, and every movement within its borders. For centuries, no foreign vessel had dared to cross into its territory without permission. Those who tried were swiftly crushed, their ships reduced to debris floating in the void. But today, something unthinkable happened. A single warship human-made had appeared inside Dominion space, bypassing every security checkpoint, every patrol, and every automated defense system. The moment the ship was detected, alarms blared across the command centers of multiple Dominion worlds. Officers scrambled to their stations, trying to make sense of the impossible readings flashing across their screens. The ship was small, far smaller than the Dominion's massive dreadnoughts, yet its energy signature was fluctuating in ways that defied logic. Its hull, composed of an unknown alloy, absorbed scans like a black hole, refusing to reveal its inner systems. It wasn't broadcasting any identification codes, wasn't responding to hails, and most disturbingly, it had stopped moving, hovering in empty space as if watching them. Fleet Admiral X Centaur stood before the massive display screen inside the Dominion's high command, his reptilian eyes narrowing at the ghostly silhouette of the unidentified warship. He had fought countless wars, crushed numerous rebellions, and overseen the destruction of entire planets, but never before had he seen a lone enemy vessel act with such boldness. "Is this some kind of joke?" he growled, his voice filled with irritation. "Humans? Here?" The very idea was insulting. Humans were insignificant, barely capable of space travel beyond their own system. They had no empire, no grand fleets, no powerful weapons. The Dominion had enslaved their colonies, raided their worlds, and taken their resources without consequence. For a human warship to appear here, in the very heart of Dominion-controlled space, was laughable, or at least it should have been. Yet, the longer X Centaur stared at the silent ship, the more strange feeling crept into his chest. It was a feeling he did not like. "Commander, send a small fleet to intercept," Centaur ordered, keeping his expression neutral. "We'll deal with this nonsense before it becomes an embarrassment." Within minutes, 6 Dominion warships, each the size of a city, rushed toward the human vessel. Their weapons were primed, their shields raised, but there was no response from the lone warship. "Hail them again," the fleet captain ordered, his voice tinged with irritation. The communication officers tried, sending messages in every known language, warning the humans to surrender or be obliterated. But there was only silence. It was unnatural. Even the weakest of species, when faced with an overwhelming force, would at least beg for their lives. The fleet captain, growing impatient, gave the order for a warning shot. A low-energy plasma burst streaked through the void, meant only to shake the enemy, not destroy them. But before it could even reach its target, the human warship Move.it didn't drift. It didn't turn slowly like Dominion ships. It vanished from its position and reappeared instantly behind the lead Dominion destroyer. The officers on board barely had time to process what had happened before their sensors went haywire. The human ship had teleported, or at least that's what the readings suggested. But that was impossible. No species, not even the Dominion's most advanced engineers, had perfected teleportation for ships of this size. It defied everything they knew about space combat. The Dominion ships scrambled to adjust their positions, their weapons locking onto the unpredictable target. But before they could fire, the human warship made its second move this time. It attacked. A blinding beam of energy, thin as a thread but burning brighter than a star, shot from the human vessel. It did not explode upon impact. It pierced. It carved. It erased. The Dominion destroyer, one of the most powerful warships in the fleet, was sliced in half like a piece of paper. There was no fire, no grand explosion, just a terrifying silence as the ship's two halves drifted apart, lifeless. Thousands of Dominion officers died in an instant, never even realizing what had hit them. For the first time in his life, Fleet Admiral X Centaur felt something he had never felt before: fear. This wasn't just a warship. This wasn't just an enemy vessel that had wandered into Dominion space. This was something else. Something terrifying. Something unstoppable. The impossible had arrived, and it was only the beginning. The Dominion fleet had never faced anything like this before. One of their mighty warships had been cut in half in the blink of an eye, destroyed by a single, impossibly precise beam. The surviving ships in the fleet froze, their commanders struggling to process what had just happened. Dominion warships were built to dominate the battlefield, their shields capable of withstanding planet-shattering attacks, their weapons designed to reduce enemies to dust. And yet, a single human warship, a species the Dominion had always considered weak, had just wiped out one of their strongest vessels without effort. The silence on the command decks of the remaining ships was heavy, filled with a growing sense of dread. The enemy had not issued threats. It had not demanded surrender. It had not even announced its presence. It had simply acted, and in doing so, shattered the Dominion's illusion of superiority. Then, without warning, the human warship moved again. It did not follow the expected flight patterns of Dominion ships. It did not drift slowly or turn in wide arcs. Instead, it vanished from its position and reappeared at an entirely different angle, circling the Dominion fleet with terrifying speed. The Dominion captains, still reeling from the first attack, scrambled to react. "All ships, open fire! Destroy it now!" The fleet commander roared, his voice breaking under the pressure. The order was met with an immediate barrage of plasma cannons, ion torpedoes, and railgun slugs, each weapon designed to tear through the strongest armor in the galaxy. The void lit up with deadly energy, a wall of destruction meant to leave nothing behind. But the human warship was faster. It weaved through the chaos with movements that shouldn't have been possible, dodging projectiles by margins so thin they seemed almost intentional. It didn't activate shields because it didn't need to. It simply never let itself be hit. The Dominion gunners, some of the best in the fleet, watched in horror as their attacks were useless, missing a target that danced through space like it could predict the future. And then, before the Dominion could adjust their aim, the warship retaliated. A second beam of light, thin and silent, cut through the blackness of space. There was no buildup, no warning, just an instant flash of destruction. Another Dominion battleship, its hull thick enough to withstand nuclear bombardments, was pierced straight through the core. A moment later, it imploded, its entire structure collapsing into itself before a silent explosion scattered debris in all directions. The remaining ships in the fleet panicked. Officers shouted over one another, desperately trying to form a new strategy. "It's too fast." One captain yelled, "We can't lock onto it." Another added. The fear was spreading, creeping through the ranks like a sickness. Back on the Dominion's high command station, Fleet Admiral Zentar watched the battle unfold in stunned silence. His reptilian claws tightened into fists as his mind raced. This was not possible. Humans were supposed to be primitive, a species still struggling to expand beyond their own system. Their warships were outdated, their weapons weak compared to the Dominion's technological might. And yet, this one human warship was tearing through his fleet as if they were nothing. It wasn't just winning, it was playing with them. The thought made his skin crawl. "This is no ordinary human vessel," Zentar muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is something else." On the battlefield, the remaining Dominion warships tried to escape. Fear had overtaken their discipline, and the captains made the only choice they thought would save them: retreat. Engines roared as they turned away, attempting to flee toward the nearest Dominion outpost. But the human warship did not allow it. It surged forward, cutting across their path with unnatural speed, and suddenly, a pulse of energy rippled outward from its hull. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly. It was a shockwave, a burst of radiation and electromagnetic force that disabled every Dominion ship in its range. Power flickered. Screens went dark. Engines died. The once powerful Dominion fleet was now helpless, drifting in space with no way to fight back. Inside the command decks of the disabled ships, officers frantically tried to reboot their systems, but nothing responded. Then, for the first time since the battle began, the human warship finally sent a message. It was short, simple, and terrifying. "Your time is over." Fleet Admiral Zentar felt a cold chill run through his body as the message repeated on every Dominion channel. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement, and Centaur believed it. The news traveled faster than light. Disappear into the void. The Dominion had suffered humiliating defeat, not at the hands of an armada, not from an advanced empire, but from a lone vessel, a warship of a species they had long dismissed as weak. Fear, a foreign and unwelcome sensation for the proud rulers of the Dominion, began to take root. The High Command, a council of the Dominion's most ruthless and calculating leaders, was in disarray. Reports flooded in from across the sector, each one painting a more disturbing picture than the last. The human ship was not stopping. Surveillance outposts along the border were going silent, their last transmissions showing only brief flashes of the dark, ghostly silhouette before they were consumed by static. Colonies near the incursion zone sent desperate distress calls, begging for protection, fearing they would be next. The Dominion, for the first time in its history, found itself on the defensive. Fleet Admiral Centaur stood before the High Command, his face grim as he addressed the gathered leaders. He was a hardened warrior, a conqueror of worlds, yet his voice carried a weight of unease. "We have underestimated them," he admitted, his claws tapping against the metal surface of the war table. "This is no ordinary human ship. This is something we were never prepared for." The council members, a mix of warlords, strategists, and political figures, exchanged uneasy glances. The Dominion had fought countless wars, had crushed rebellions, had brought entire species to their knees, but never had they encountered an enemy like this. The idea of humans inferior, primitive humans bringing war to the Dominion's doorstep was unthinkable, and yet the evidence was undeniable. The silence in the chamber was broken by the deep, rasping voice of Lord Careth, one of the most senior members of the council. His reptilian eyes gleamed with suspicion. "How did they build such a ship?" he demanded, his tone laced with frustration. "They were nothing. A minor race barely capable of interstellar travel. Have they been hiding their technology from us? Have they formed an alliance with a more powerful species?" The questions hung in the air, but no answers came. Beyond the halls of the High Command, fear was taking hold of the Dominion citizens. On every world, in every system, people whispered about the human warship, about its impossible speed, its deadly precision, its ability to vanish and reappear without warning. Rumors spread that it was not a ship, but a living entity, a monster that stalked the void. Others believed it was an unstoppable weapon, a doomsday creation that would bring the Dominion to its knees. Some even feared that more were coming, that this was only the beginning of humanity's revenge. Panic took root in the outer colonies, where Dominion forces were stretched thin. Some planetary governors began evacuating civilians, fearing that their worlds would be next. Military leaders scrambled to fortify defenses, deploying fleets to key locations, but no one knew where the warship would strike next. The Dominion, once a symbol of strength and absolute control, now felt vulnerable. Then, another blow came. A heavily fortified Dominion research station near the border one that had been conducting experiments on human prisoners was suddenly destroyed. There was no warning, no battle. The station's security feed captured only a few seconds of footage before it was lost, a shadow moving across the stars, the glint of an unknown energy weapon firing once and then silence. When rescue teams arrived, they found nothing, not a single survivor, not even debris. It was as if the entire station had been erased from existence. The High Command received the report with horrified silence. It was clear now this warship was not merely defending itself. It was hunting them. Fleet Admiral Centaur clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The Dominion needed to act, but how could they fight something they couldn't understand? Their weapons had failed. Their fleets had been outmaneuvered. Their outposts were being eliminated one by one. The Dominion had always believed in overwhelming force, in crushing its enemies with sheer numbers, but numbers meant nothing when facing an enemy that never allowed itself to be hit. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion was afraid. Centaur knew that if they did not stop this warship soon, it would not only be their fleets that fell, it would be their entire empire. The Dominion's High Command had never been so silent. The vast chamber, where war strategies were once shouted with confidence, now felt empty, as if the very air had been stolen by fear. The warship was still out there, somewhere in the darkness of space, moving unseen, striking. Then, for the first time since the attacks began, the warship sent a message. It did not come through the usual diplomatic channels. It did not follow any known encryption codes. The message forced itself onto every Dominion communication network, hijacking every frequency, broadcasting itself across every screen in the Empire. It played on warship monitors, on civilian holoscreens, on personal devices of Dominion citizens. No one could ignore it. No one could stop it. The message began with a single image, a Dominion labor camp, one of many where human prisoners had been sent after their colonies were conquered. The footage was grainy, but the horror was clear. Emaciated bodies, humans forced into harsh labor under brutal Dominion overseers. Cries of pain. The sound of whips. The weak left to die under the merciless alien sun. Then came another image, a research facility filled with humans trapped in metal cages, their bodies experimented on, their screams of agony echoing through the halls. And then the message spoke. A voice, calm yet cold, filled every Dominion world. You thought we were weak. The words were spoken in the Dominion's own language, perfect and precise. You thought we were prey. There was no anger in the voice. No shouting. Just a simple, quiet statement of truth. You believed you could take our people, enslave them, torture them, experiment on them. You believed that we would never strike back. A pause. You were wrong. The footage shifted. The Dominion's greatest battleships, the same ones they had boasted as unstoppable, now nothing but wreckage. Outposts, once symbols of their control, burning. Every attempt to resist, crushed with terrifying precision. One ship, one human warship had done this, and there was nothing the Dominion could do to stop it. Then the final words came. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to make peace. We are here to deliver justice. To those who surrender, there will be mercy. To those who resist, there will be nothing. And then, just like that, the message ended. Across the Dominion, panic erupted. Civilians, once told that humanity was nothing more than a minor species, now feared for their lives. Soldiers, once proud of their empire's strength, now doubted if they could ever win. Some worlds began to riot, demanding their leaders take action. Others fell into chaos, as planetary governors ordered emergency evacuations, fearing they would be the next target. In the darkest corners of the Empire, whispers of surrender began to spread. But inside the high command, there was only silence. They had no plan, no strategy, no way to fight an enemy that could strike from the shadows and vanish without a trace. Fleet Admiral Xentar clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Dominion had ruled through fear, through power, through the absolute certainty that no one could challenge them. But now, for the first time, they were the ones who were afraid. The Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries, crushing any opposition with overwhelming force. Their fleets were unmatched, their armies unstoppable. Entire civilizations had fallen before them, their worlds burned, their people enslaved. To the Dominion, war was a game they always won. Until now, .it started as a rumor, a lone warship, barely the size of a battleship, entering Dominion space. No one paid attention at first. A single vessel was no threat to an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds. But then, the reports began. A border fleet sent to intercept it was destroyed in minutes. Not just defeated, annihilated. Their ships were left as lifeless wrecks, drifting in space, their weapons useless, their defenses shattered. No distress signals, no survivors. Just silence. At first, the High Command refused to believe it. A fluke, a malfunction, some unknown natural phenomena. But then it happened again. And again. The warship moved like a ghost, striking without warning, disappearing before the Dominion could mount a counterattack. Outposts were wiped out in the dead of night. Surveillance stations went offline one by one. Entire fleets were rendered powerless before they could even fire a shot. The Dominion had never seen anything like it. This was no ordinary warship. This was something else. Fleet Admiral Zentar stood in the war room, staring at the chaotic reports flashing across the screen. His officers were arguing, shouting over each other, but he barely heard them. He had fought countless battles, conquered countless worlds, but for the first time, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. "What are we dealing with?" One of the generals growled, his claws tapping impatiently against the table. "How can one ship be doing this?" "We don't know," another officer admitted, his voice shaking. "Our weapons don't work against it. Our defenses don't stop it. It appears out of nowhere, and by the time we react, it's already too late." Centaur clenched his jaw. Impossible. There was no way a single human warship could be this powerful. Humanity was a minor species, barely significant in the grand scale of the galaxy. The Dominion had crushed their fleets, taken their colonies, enslaved their people. They should have been broken. And yet, here they were, facing an enemy they could not stop. Then came the next strike. A heavily fortified Dominion battle station, designed to withstand entire armadas, was destroyed in seconds. No warning. No escape. The warship had pierced through its shields as if they didn't exist, its weapons cutting through reinforced armor with unnatural precision. The footage from the final moments of the station showed a shadow in the darkness, sleek and deadly, glowing with an energy no Dominion scientist could understand. The last transmission was a voice human, calm and unforgiving. "This is for what you did to our people." The message sent a wave of panic across the Dominion. The citizens, who had always believed in their empire's absolute dominance, now whispered in fear. If the mighty Dominion fleets could not stop a single ship, what else could they do? Some began to question everything they had been told about humans. Others demanded retaliation. But how do you fight an enemy you can't even find? In a desperate move, the High Command assembled an armada, the largest fleet ever gathered in the history of the Dominion. Hundreds of warships, thousands of fighters, all sent to a single system where the human warship had last been detected. It was a show of force, a final stand. The Dominion believed that no matter how powerful this ship was, it could not stand alone against the full might of their empire. They were wrong. The battle lasted 4 minutes. The first wave of Dominion ships lost power before they even fired a shot. Their engines failed, their weapons shut down, their systems collapsed. They floated helplessly as the warship moved through them like a specter, destroying ship after ship with perfect, terrifying accuracy. The second wave tried to surround it, but the warship was too fast, moving in ways that no Dominion vessel could track. In seconds, the flagship was cut in half, its explosion illuminating the battlefield like a dying sun. The survivors tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to run. When the warship finally vanished, the once mighty fleet was nothing more than debris scattered across space. The Dominion was finished. The warship had done the impossible. It had shattered the belief that the Dominion was invincible. It had proven that humans were not weak, not broken, not prey. They were something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The High Command, once so confident in their power, now sat in silence, their empire crumbling around them. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the warship moved forward, leaving behind only destruction, only fear, only one undeniable truth: the galaxy would never be the same again.